Welcome to the March meeting. I was going to say February, but it's definitely March. Apologies for absence. We have Andrew Gray, Dominic Elton, Mike Kelly, John Petrinos, Evelyn Stacey, Susan Warren, and I understand Theo is going to be a little bit late. Are there any other apologies?
It's quick as a list to review.
I wouldn't dream of being quite so rude. My name is not Mrs. Front. I'm not sure. Declarations of interest. Stop it.
Don't think so.
No.
Nope.
Interest? No?
None.
Chris?
Interest? No. Well, I suppose we all know an item 11.
Yeah, well, so I was going to say the same. I said before.
That's general dispensation. I think it's what the monitoring officer would say. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Chairperson's announcements. I'm really pleased to say this month I have none whatsoever. Minutes of the last meeting. So we need to approve the correct record the minutes of the meeting on held on the 4th of February, a couple of weeks ago. And I have. Oh, thank you, Sharon. Thank you. All those in favour? You're brilliant. You're all ahead of the game here. I'm really impressed with you all. And consider any matters arising, so we'll go through as usual. Page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. No hands are raised. Business of urgency, we don't have any. Public speaking, Mr. Foxwood has joined us, but he's asked me to could possibly speak when we get to item 9, which I have said would be perfectly in order. And it's very nice to have a guest with us. Welcome, Roger. So item 7 is the medium-term financial plan, and Ben is going to take us through.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members, on this lovely sunny day. I have to confess this has been a really challenging budget to prepare. It's been made even more challenging by recent discussions with DEFRA in the last week. DEFRA has shared an indicative overall 25-26 settlement with us, well, with all the 10 national park authorities, of 44.8 million resources and £50 million in capital. That's across the 10 English national parks. This is a £4 million reduction in the RDEL, which is the Revenue Resource Departmental Expenditure Limit baseline, and a £12.5 million increase in the capital CDEL increase. Where national parks are primarily delivery organisations, so we historically have relied very much on the revenue side of this. Individual allocations for each national park authority have not yet been confirmed, but we are all likely to face some level of revenue decrease and some level of capital increase. We're awaiting further guidance on this, and we're waiting for these amounts to be confirmed. So in the budget paper, I speak of the potential for requiring a secondary budget to be presented to you once we have formal clarification of this, because this is our most significant income assumption that we are looking at, and we are a matter of 4 weeks away from the start of the financial year. So what I present to you is essentially what was all prepared prior to that discussion. We may have to revisit this once we have full confirmation of those amounts from DEFRA. It does present us an opportunity as well in terms of capital spend, but at the moment we are uncertain as to what actually the impact will be on us as an authority. So the purpose of the report before you is to consider and approve the medium-term financial plan for the period 25-26 through to 29-30. It's also to adopt the revenue budget for 25-26, starting from 1st of April. It's to, and that's primarily for the funding provided by National Park grants from DEFRA and our self-generated income. So recommendations within the reports are to note the month 9 budget monitoring position, to approve the core, capital and programmes budgets, contributions to reserves, and note the position on reserves projected at the 1st of April 25, and adopt the attached medium-term financial plan for the 5-year forward period. So in terms of our financial and risk implications, the budget, the medium-term financial plan, our capital strategy, they're all key elements in managing our financial risk, and members will be aware from our December paper about some risk management Our strategic risk register details the risk in terms of funding, both in terms of a failure of the National Park grants or absence of shortfall of external funding as our core strategic risk as an authority. So in terms of mitigate that, the budget will be reviewed at the half-year stage. Adjustments may be made if significant changes occur, and there may be need to bring an emergency budget update to members once our DEFRA grant allocations have been formally received. So the first part of this report looks at our budget monitoring. That's for the current financial year, 2024. Section 2 of the report, Appendix 1. These provide a high-level summary of the management accounts that have been detailed on a monthly basis with our delivery team and leadership team members. And that's a position to the end of December, 31st of December. The monthly income and expenditure figures highlight issues such as rising costs in our ongoing planning dispute, overspending the woodlands budgets due to large spend on hazardous trees and storm terror preparations, and additional spend in the conservation advice and support cost centres. Overall, the appendix indicates a favourable overall variance of about £39,000, so it's just over 1% of our gross expenditure. I'm happy to take questions in the meantime or at the end of the process, so please interject if you have anything significant coming up. Our core budget for 25-26 is detailed in Section 3 and Appendix 2, and this reflects the anticipated income, the expenditure for ongoing services during 25-26, and significant changes from prior year include the inclusion of project funding and associated expenditure. So what I brought to you back in November, December for the revised budget, I've carried this on through the 25-26 full budget. So we see a full view of all the project income and expenditure as well as our core baseline levels. We see the continuation of the impact of the business review that was implemented on the 1st of April 2024, and that was to mitigate our budget gap at a time of around £450,000. As I've said so far, one of our largest variables is not currently fully confirmed, that's of the income and national park grants. The second most significant assumption for us is in terms of our wage inflation and wage growth. So for the purposes of the budget, medium-term financial plan, this has been assumed at 3%, 25-26. And that pay settlement will be subject to negotiation between employers and unions. In terms of staffing costs, we also have a considerable impact with the national insurance changes that take effect from 1st of April, the reduction of the banding amounts and the increase in the percentage. That's roughly an £80,000 impact on us, so we don't have any mitigation towards that from central sources. For 25-26, all project income and expenditure is included, alongside our traditional core elements, and that helps us to arrive at total income and expenditure of about £5.9 million. Our programmes, our partnerships and contributions are detailed in Section 4, Appendix 3. These are contributions to reserve for various purposes. They contribute to a long-running, so greater than 1 year projects such as Ash Dieback, which you've heard a presentation from colleagues on recently. Our estates projects for backlog maintenance on our buildings and estates. They're for research and development, introduction of our partnership plan, local plan, and also for our kind of internal development, for internships, for apprenticeships. Fixed-term discretionary projects are also included in this budget, so we have support for tourism, the Exmoor NPA project as well, And in total, our partnerships and programmes elements contribute £201,000 of our budget for this financial year. Moving on to our capital programme for 25-26. This details plan spend on assets and also how they are financed. The budget includes allocations for corporate equipment and site enhancements, and sections 5 and 6 of the report and Appendix 4 are pertinent sections for this purpose. Appendix 4 details our programme for the year, and that's predominantly focused around our estate works for flat pits, as well as our annual contribution towards the purchase of vehicles, plant and equipment. We traditionally have a very small capital element of the budget. Last year, we had, obviously the driver impact was a a sizable difference. From Appendix 4, you will see from the detail of the pre-existing schemes, the previous schemes, that we have achieved a significant amount over the past few years. There's lots to look at there and see actually that's a very good project. We have a moderately low risk attitude towards capital investment in comparison to our local government neighbours. And our expenditure is predominantly focused on maintaining or replacing assets, enhancing assets, as opposed to procuring new ones. The next significant section is on our reserves. And the anticipated level reserves at the start of the year is shown in Appendix 5. I aim to maintain our general fund reserves at approximately £550,000, which is considered adequate to manage our in-year fluctuations. Appendix 5 details our projected reserves after estimations for reserves transfers at the year end, contributions from our partnerships fund in Appendix 3, and we hold principally two types of reserves. So we have our general fund and contingency unallocated, but also more significantly our earmarked reserves. These are held to support projects and programmes that are multi-year in nature and also multi-partner as well. Our earmarked reserves have been categorised across the new subjective headings we introduced last year and in the main budget areas. So you'll see from the reserves appendix that we have three contingent reserves: a general fund contingency, and the legal contingency fund. And I estimate that our general fund and contingency will maintain the £550,000 level to the start of the year. This amount roughly equates to 1/12 of or 1 month of our total income, and is required as a base for working capital for us. Overall, we are anticipating level reserves to reduce by just over £100,000 during this current year. And with the contributions from reserves in Appendix 3, we anticipate starting the year with around £3.4 million of combined reserves. That's both the earmarked and general fund. As Section 151 officer, I am content to state that our level of reserves is adequate to meet our current and anticipated medium-term financial plan challenges. Then the final section of this report is around our medium-term financial plan, so it's bringing all those elements together and projecting forwards over the 5 years. It outlines future resources, funding opportunities, and our cost pressures. It highlights our key assumptions and provides an overview of the authority's future financial position. And I'm pleased to say that currently we are showing a balanced budget for 25-26 and also 26-27. Now that would not have been possible without the business process review that we implemented last year and the continued work by the teams in meeting costs and highlighting any future potential service savings. So Section 8 of the report takes members through this medium-term financial plan and combines it with Appendix 6. And it really is our skeleton document for the authority's financial planning. It maps out on our assumptions on income generation and our spending patterns. And you'll see it's for a 5-year period. You'll be aware that this future year, 25-26, is a single-year government spending review. We are still awaiting the outcome of that. We've been informed that 26-27 onwards is a 3-year settlement, but we've had no guarantees about the timing of that at this stage. One of the most significant impacts to us over this kind of 6 or 7 year period has been the flatlining of our national park grants. We have increased our externally generated income. We have secured grants and funding opportunities. Our national park grant contributes about 55% of our total income. That has been a significant downward trend from, say, around 2010 when it was 75% of our income source. In Section 821, I provide some sensitivity analysis in regards to percentage change in some of our major variables. So our national park grant, pay award, interest received, and our traded income. The most significant of these, unsurprisingly, being national park grant and our cost of living payables on staffing. And And then in section 9, I detail strategic risks, the continuation of our work, those that impact on budgetary areas, and again, National Park Grant pay awards factor heavily as the most significant risk areas again. So whilst the current arena is very challenging, and the current financial climate for the coming 5 years will be subject to some very future-gazing assumptions being made, we do have significant final challenges remaining. But this report in its current state provides you, as the authority, the base to set a balanced budget for the 25-26 financial year, and it provides sufficient resources for the next iteration of the partnership plan, which is currently being consulted on. So again, I state that any changes to the grant from the 25-26 formal arrangements for spending review actions will be at first managed through internal resources, predominantly reserves, before bringing a second budget to you as members to review. So thank you for bearing with me as I've gone through each of these sections. I hope that has some level of clarity for you. We'd be happy to take any questions you may have on this.
Thank you very much, Ben. And you know, it has been really difficult, and I'd like to thank you and the team for what you've done, but also I'd like to thank the Chief Executive, because in the last 12 months it's been very tricky with having to go through all the various changes we have with the staff, and you know, that brings with it quite a lot of pressure to deal with people's expectations about their employment and the situation we're in. I don't think we should underestimate how difficult it has been, and it's looking like we're going to have to do something again in the future in the next few weeks. And I'm sure everybody else is not really looking forward to having to do all this again in May. Any questions? We've all gone really quiet now. Nancy.
Thank you for the report. Just a couple, if I may. The first one is around the staff costs at 92%. In the paper it says there's an aspiration for it to be 70%. There feels a wide gulf there. I'm just wondering, is that aspiration current? Because there seems quite a lot of disparity between the two. Do you want me to do them all rounded into one? Or
yeah, it might be fine. If that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course. The next one was around the risk that you looked at, and that risk of the grant reducing. I think you've got likelihood at medium. I think I could probably put likelihood high there. I think a couple of those risks are probably high rather than medium. The next one was around vehicles. I think there was a reduction in vehicle spend. And I just question that, because I know the aspiration is to go to electric, and I know electric vehicles are a lot more expensive than none. My last question is, this might all actually go out the window if a lot of it, as in, it might all need to be looked at again if our figures are different when we get them bottomed out. It's just that understanding of where it goes from here and how that is dealt with in budgeting terms. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first one, yes, aspirational at that level. We are managing that staffing basis. There is a mix of, apologies. Definitely aspirational. We have a mix of metrics we use for that in terms of staff percentage against national park grants, but also staff percentage against total income.
Can I just come back? Do we know how that compares with other national parks?
I haven't done that benchmarking recently, I'm afraid.
Okay.
The second one, in terms of risk, the grant reducing is high. Yes, I definitely agree with you. These papers were prepared 3-4 weeks ago. That's prior to the conversation last week, and on that stage, we were anticipating a flatline national park grant, and the communications were along that level. So I think, in terms of the report, at the time it was correct. In hindsight, and following the recent week, then yes, I do agree with that. I'm waiting.
I think I would leave it high. I think everything's, there's so many unknowns around budgets generally at the moment. I don't think it's to have it high.
In terms of the vehicle question, we have £25,000 assigned for that corporate equipment vehicles per year. That was £50,000. We had built up a slight reserve. We have actually made some significant grounds on this in the past year and a half. We now have 6 electric vehicles, 1 plug-in hybrid. So we have essentially we've got half of our fleet has been greened. We've now got the more tricky areas, so the four. But I'm working on a DEFRA group to look at that and actually how we make things. And yes, electric vehicles are expensive, but we were actually making use of the government frameworks for that. So actually one of the Nissan Leafs that's sat outside you is very economic in terms of the pricing, comparable to a diesel petrol equivalent. So and sorry, the final question.
It's just how we move forward from here.
Oh, yes. Apologies, didn't write that one down. So it's been a very busy week since we had that first discussion. We have in a sense, a plan of action. We have reviewed the significant budget areas in this past week, because actually there is potentially more resource available in this indicative assessment, albeit not in the way that we normally use it. So there's potentially less revenue, potentially more capital. So we're looking at opportunities of how we can use the DEFRA criteria for capital spend to make use of that capital. So I wouldn't say it's not really doom and gloom. There is a positive light in this, in that we may have some really good opportunities to do what we want to in terms of our estate and wider estate. We have reviewed that, and at this stage I believe we can make adjustments to negate the need for another business review at this stage. That's pretty much all I can say on that one.
Thank you. Just to say, it's really challenging when you've got a short time scale, so I'm pleased to hear that you've been already looking and considering. I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Following on from what you were just saying there, FIPL's going to continue. Is there a way we can leverage some funding out of FIPL for staff time positions to counterbalance some of the revenue losses there? And then I'm interested about the income generated from interest on savings and reserves. Is there any foreseeable differences there in interest rates, etc., or is this all action we can take there to leverage more of that? Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the first one, we will seek to make use of FIPL where we have projects on our own land that utilise staff, whether it actually mitigates the cost of any existing staff. That's a difficult one to answer. Probably not really. Maybe additional staff resource, and that will provide the answer to. The second one, the interest has been very considerable in the last 3 years, or the last 2.5 years. Now things are stabilised, and current bank rates mean that we're getting around 4.75%, 4.6% on our return on our income. And the next paper actually goes into more detail on that in terms of setting the scene. But that's been very useful for us to kind of allocate to specific projects. So in the previous financial year, it actually supported us in our new finance system. In the current year, it's providing additional capacity within the finance and facilities teams. So just appointed a fixed term contract for a 2-year period based on additional interest over and above that we've budgeted for. So we're making the best use we can of that at this time. And you'll see from the next report, the interest projections into the next year are in excess of 3%. So we should achieve what I've budgeted for in these papers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. First of all, thanks to Ben. I wouldn't envy him the job of Chief Finance Officer in these times at the moment, especially with no degree of continuity. There was quite a degree of optimism, wasn't there, Ben, that we would be moving towards a longer-term settlement and some knowledge of where we would be. In fact, if anything, it's got worse, not better, with the uncertainty that we got in front of us. And I think, from your point of view, some optimism for this year in what's there. However, what is evident is that we are moving to more and more project-based type funding approach. That additional capital spend, from my perspective, means that this year then looks okay, but there's no guarantees you'll get additional capital spend next year, which would, on flatlining what's being offered at the moment for our core grant, would be at a rough guess, and you can correct me, would mean that next year we could be potentially 15% worse off, or thereabouts, if you take the assorted costs and pay increases into account. So I think, yes, thank you very much. Incredibly challenging, but very much appreciated you've been able to put together a balanced budget in this time, especially in the knowledge now that you're probably going to have to significantly revise quite a lot of it in a very short time. It doesn't help us, does it, from a national parks perspective, for any long-term planning, because you're stumbling from one funding period to another. And actually, most of what we do as our core purposes is based around long-term planning. You know, our nature-based activities, our environmental activities, are not one-off things that happen overnight. It's a very long-term activity, and it requires continual investment over time, just as it does with any of our liaison with people, which are a core part of what we do as well. You can't just do one thing and leave it. It's an ongoing work stream. So, thank you very much for that. Very much appreciated. I'm not going to ask you any questions about the future because you'd be crystal ball gazing, I suspect, as much as any of the rest of us around here. I would imagine as we get close to a comprehensive spending review, they might well be willing to give us a little bit better degree of certainty as to what might be there, but of course that's not due until June, is it? Although indicative values should be out before then. So on that basis, really, I'd like to move the recommendations, together with a thanks for Ben and his team for producing this in these times.
Thank you. Jeremy?
May I second that recommendation?
Thank you. Is there any more questions from anybody? In which case, can we go to the vote? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 8, Treasury Management Strategy Session. Ben, it's you again.
Thank you, Chairman and members, for that last item. So our Treasury Management activities. So the authority received a report on our Treasury Management activities on 3 occasions throughout the financial year. In advance of the financial year, the Treasury Management and Investment strategies are determined. We conduct a mid-year review around November, December, then a final report is delivered at the end of the financial year, normally in July. So item 8 on today's agenda recommends Exmoor National Park Authority's Treasury Management or annual investment strategies for 25-26. And these are requirements of the Treasury Management Code 2021 edition, Prudential Code 2021, and also the 2003 Local Government Act. The Treasury Management Strategy concerns the circumstances where the authority could borrow and where funding would be sought from. It contains required prudential indicators, which for large parts this authority is zeros. We have no borrowing, we are debt-free. We have no plans to do so at this current stage. We are debt-free and have investments which currently stand around the £3 million mark. So the annual investment strategy that covers the loans that the Park Authority might make to generate a return from surplus cash. And our priority is given to security and liquidity, and only then is highest yield sought. We benefit greatly from a service level agreement with Somerset Council. They manage these investments, they prepare this paper on my behalf. So that is free from significant risk. It also describes a process by which counterparties are assessed and chosen. And in our circumstances, Somerset Council assumes the risks of capital of counterparty defaults, but any loss of interest would reduce the overall return of cash balances that we've just discussed in the previous item, should one of the counterparties of SC default. So, in recommending this Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy to you, I wish to emphasise that we're not seeking to depart from current practice. The strategy suggests a low charge and low risk, and the authority benefits massively from the skills and expertise of the investment team at Somerset Council. It's not a job that I could do on my own with the resources I have even at this stage. That's pretty much all I would say on this report at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Honestly, it's like deja vu, isn't it? Yeah. We do this so frequently. Anyway, any questions? Lee?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks ever so much indeed, Ben, for the report. Just one thing from me. You mentioned your close collaboration with Somerset Council Treasury Management.
Yes.
I know their advisors are Arling close, having sat on the audit committee with Mandy and Stephen and that. Do you have any? Do you manage to get to any of the meetings they will have with the Treasury advisors, Arlene Close, just to have an input or anything like that? Would that be beneficial to you at all?
It would be beneficial time and effort.
Yeah.
The roles are very mixed one here. So it's not just the finances, it's our facilities, it's our IT, and some of the elements of corporate support. So actually, it would be lovely to see that, but actually in terms of real value for us, I'm not sure what it would change, if anything, because we're not likely to make any decisions on anything from that.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Robin.
Yeah, just one there. The service level agreement with Somerset, is that ongoing, like continuing for the foreseeable future then?
As far as I'm aware, it's continued on an annual basis, the foreseeable future. So obviously, if significant changes occur at Somerset, then we will need to revisit that. But I've not been made aware of any.
And I would assume that, looking at financial indicators at the moment, there is a fair chance that our interest received will be slightly less next year than this year that we're in than last year. Would that be a correct assumption?
That's a correct assumption, but still it's above what we'd anticipated previously for that period.
Well, on that basis, can I move your recommendations, please?
Thank you. Francis, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, I do. This is Shades of Richard Edgell.
Oh no.
You know what I'm going to ask. The deficit on the pension fund has gone down. Are we content that the pension fund is doing all that it ought? Do we see any rocks in the water ahead of us? This is to remember, Richard.
It's very much like Richard. It's definitely deja vu now.
You're happy?
Yes, I do recall that.
Are you content that it's all?
Yes, I mean there are some interesting concepts on the horizon in terms of the pension funds and the LGPS. But the current stage, yes, I mean the deficits are reducing. It's having a positive impact. We wait for the next triennial valuation and see what that brings. But yes, at the moment I'm happy with the service provided by that pension scheme. We have no great choice in this. It's being well managed as far as I can see. The team that manage the pension fund also manage our investments. So I've got significant level of confidence with them.
Thank you. Okay. I see no more hands. Can we take the vote, please? All those in favour? And again, Carol, that's unanimous. Thank you. So moving on to item 9, communication strategy, and a little change over staff there. Mr. Foxwell, would you like to come and speak to us?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. As somebody who takes an interest in the goings-on of this national park since I've been living down here, and if I can't attend a meeting, I look on the YouTube. I would appeal to you to put out to the members to speak clearly into the microphone, because looking back on the YouTube clips, quite a few. It's just an observation. Turn the microphone on and then talk to the chair or whoever. So it's, you're not picking up the question. So if that could just be picked up at some stage, please. Moving on to the partnership plan. I've spoken to Chris Webber, who's the local NFU branch chairman for Exmoor, and he agrees that in the partnership plan we should have, and we've still got time, to have a meeting with the wider farming community on the implications of and the recommendations to come from the farming community to have input into the partnership plan. The South Downs National Park Authority are currently going through a similar consultation at the moment, and they've had quite a number of face-to-face meetings with farmers and the wider farming community and the general public. So why haven't we had face-to-face meetings with the wider farming community, especially the NFU, as I've raised before, and when I've raised it before, you've discussed it in your standards committee, and recognised the importance of engaging, as one of your fellow members, Mr. Ellicott there, has said that you know, you need to engage with all channels. So it would be great to see you defer the decision from the 10th of March. Just quickly, two other quick points.
Go on then.
Is the beaver
I'm
gone?
being
Or,
kind.
the pine martin.
Oh yes.
The pine martin. Yes. There's an opportunity for you as members to gauge the thoughts of the farming community and the wider community of Exmoor in coming to a decision before we allow pine martins to come down to Exmoor. At a meeting last week in the Moorland Hall, the presentation was given by the Wildlife Trust, and the consent of the farming and people that were in that room put a show of hands up at the end, and they all voted no for the pine marten to come down here. So you need to seriously engage with people like Bernard Drew, who's a large landowner and has got this big potential problems of disease and everything else. The pine martens are not here because of that. And just the last thing, I would encourage you to look on YouTube. There's a YouTube which was posted on YouTube a month ago about the ambitions for drivers on a heritage site on Exmoor, wildlife meadows. We can look at food production as well as part in the uplands. So food production is never going to be the most important thing. What sort of message, as I read it, and that, you know, it says, you know, it's in there in the text to say that food production is not the most important thing. It's sad times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So those items were not on the agenda, so what we will do is we'll send you a written reply, please, Chief Executive, to those points that you make. Okay?
What's that?
We won't be debating them now, it's not an item agenda, I've been kind. The other
So
items,
none of those points.
they're not about the communication strategy, no.
Well, they are. They are.
Sorry, we're not going to debate now.
Well, that's a disappointment.
So, item 9, can we have the presentation, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. I'm going to hopefully present this very briefly because, if you recall, you've all had a chance to consider the draft communication strategy. We sent you all a draft and took feedback, and we also had a discussion at a member forum. So you've got a copy in front of you in your papers, and I just want to kind of briefly summarise a few points, and then I'll take any questions. But I think, you know, the starting point is we do have a very small communications team here. You know, we are one of the smaller national parks, and, you know, whereas many parks have a kind of team of 6 or 7 full-time staff, we have less than 2 full-time staff dedicated to communications. But I think one of the things we try to make clear in this new strategy is that every one of us in this room, everyone working for the organisation, including our volunteers, you as members, our staff, and even some of our partners, all have a role to play in communicating our messages. And so, you know, it is very much a team effort. And I think as a result of that team effort, we do have some very good results. And I'm not going to go through it in detail, but section 2 of the report just pulls out a few highlights of some of the work that's been done over the last 12 to 18 months and the impact of that. So this year we set out in our corporate plan as a priority to pull together a communication strategy. It's something we haven't actually had as an authority before. It doesn't mean we weren't doing things, it doesn't mean we weren't doing things well, but it was perhaps a little bit more dispersed, a bit more ad hoc. So the idea of having a kind of overarching communication strategy for the authority is to help us work more effectively and efficiently, to help us present our desired objectives and outcomes. It's very much about identifying and considering who our core audiences are and our different means of reaching them, our communications channels. And it's also around ensuring some consistency and some buy-in across the whole organisation, and to give a bit more focus and clear direction, particularly to officers on the ground, around what our key messages are and how we want to be distilling them. And it's also an opportunity to develop those key messages and to evolve them. So the final draft strategy is detailed in Annex 1 of the report, and it aims to inspire and engage more people to help look after and celebrate Exmoor. And I think it is important to emphasise that it's about our corporate communications work. There is a lot more what I would describe as broader engagement work going on across the authority, particularly led by the learning and engagement team, particularly through things like national park centres, but actually all of our teams are engaging with different audiences at different times. But this is very much about our kind of corporate communications work and talking about the organisation as opposed to maybe engaging people in the broader national park. It's very much framed and kind of sitting underneath, if you like, other documents. So we've got a current partnership plan, we've got an emerging draft for the new partnership plan, we have our organisational development strategy, we have thematic strategies such as our nature recovery vision, our rural enterprise Exmoor vision, etc. So all of these kind of frame the communication strategy that sits underneath that to try and distill what together are we trying to communicate and to whom. So key elements of the actual strategy include identifying some of our key audiences, and these very much go beyond our kind of traditional kind of simplistic way of looking around visitors versus residents and businesses. It's there are a lot of audiences, there's a lot of crossover between them. There are various ways we can group them which we've identified in the strategy. We've developed a series of key messages. There's about 10 messages. These very much align with our statutory purposes and our corporate priorities, and they also chime very well with the objectives and the ambitions in the new draft partnership plan. These are rarely going to ever be used as a kind of carbon copy. We're not just going to cut and paste those exact messages verbatim, but it's very much a guide in terms of looking at all of our comms outputs. Are there key messages that we can weave into something? Are there opportunities? Have we kind of made our points well enough? We set out our approach, which is really around a kind of a proactive approach as a first step, but also reactive approach, and looking also around crisis communications, which we hope we don't have to deal with, and that's always the unforeseen, but it's better to be forewarned and prepared. We set out some high-level principles, which again, they're not rules, but they are principles that we will try and apply across all of our communications and how we respond to people, how we communicate, how we share our messages, the different medias that we use. And then the Appendix 1 of the strategy describes an overview of our key communication channels. Again, it's not exhaustive, and in particular, especially around digital communication, it's changing all the time. It's quite an evolving area at the moment, particularly as I say around digital channels that were once big priorities, almost overnight become less of a priority just because of external factors. So we've put that as an appendix so that we can keep that updated and under review, and it will be, as I say, something that will evolve over time. So that's really all I wanted to say. I would just like to say thank you to Evelyn, who isn't here today, Evelyn Stacey, and also Laura Williams, who have both worked with our team in terms of reviewing the early drafts and kind of developing this strategy, and also my thanks to Pete, Ray and Carol Cook in our team, who have very much been a part of this process to pull this together. But in conclusion, really, the strategy hopefully will guide us in making the best use of pretty finite resources for maximum impact, really against our purposes, against our priorities, and at a time that we've heard of increased financial pressure. So yeah, very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Phil?
Yes.
Yes, please don't get your microphone.
Speak out the microphone. Yes, thank you, Jen. Thank you. I think it's very, it's a great bit of work, but there's a couple of omissions. One in particular, which I've mentioned before, is it's not explained anywhere in here that it's a mostly privately owned Exmoor. And I think that's a really important message to get across to all that key audience you mentioned. And I think a lot of people that live and work on Exmoor don't think Exmoor National Park, they think Exmoor, they think it's something different. So I think it's important if you really want to communicate with the local people, then you need to consider that. And the other one is about forums. I don't think forums are functioning that well at the moment, so that form of communication needs to be looked at again, and I think that needs to be strengthened. Those are the two main things, but particularly I think it's nowhere in here is explained at any level that it's a national park, but it's mostly privately owned. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take Francis' question as well?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Lot of work, tiny team, huge task, so congratulations. I've got two things. I absolutely applaud the proposals and what you're doing to be organised and thoughtful about it, which is what having a strategy means. But I've got two things I want to say. One is tiny, and one is slightly bigger. The tiny one is the introduction, the third para. Our work requires balance and compromise to deliver against our purposes. Absolutely it does. But there are two things. It's about wording. I just wonder whether collaboration rather than compromise actually gets us to where we want, rather than we're retreating from where we want to be. We are collaborating to be where we want to be. And I would also, for the same reason, think, can we use another word rather than against, a positive one. Those are the tiny, tiny bits, end of. Now, the more strategic bit is the listening bit. It comes up on page 8. It comes up in the appendix under the forums and things. I just wonder whether there's an opportunity to make that stronger. For example, in that same third paragraph for collaboration and so on, that a partnership approach, communication is key, and it's two-way, something there that introduces that idea. And I think possibly also it would be a really good idea to have it somewhere in our strategy, if you can find a way of working that in. And the thing that made me think that particularly, and that is sitting back here, not seeing the words on a triangle. I see what the triangle's doing, but they're all pointing one way. And whether there's something that can be done to help that sense, so that when we get all the way down to page 8, it's not coming, oh, they're sort of putting that in. Yes?
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you. I've got two more speakers, but if we do those questions first, and then we'll do the next two.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I think in terms of Mr. Gein's point around it being a privately owned national park, but it's true of our UK parks, and it is something that's a difficult concept for people to get their heads around. So I think, if you want us to, we could look at, I think there are some key messages where we could just read that into there. I think it is something that we often will explain. It's something that a lot of people don't have that concept. So I think, there's no issue with putting that in. But I think, regardless as to whether it sits there, it is something that is continually pushed out. In terms of forums, I think, one of the reasons we've kept the kind of channels in the appendix rather than as the main strategy is really we kind of recognise these are all ways evolving, and I think in particular in terms of we have the National Park Forum, and I think that was a pilot for a year, and I believe Chief Executive is planning to bring something back in a future meeting to look at that in more detail and to review that and evaluate it and look at what the next steps might be. So all of those channels will remain ongoing. In terms of Mr. Nicholson's points, I think yes, I think we can certainly make that the suggested change to the introduction, and we can also look at around that listening thing. I think in terms of a triangle, you talk about the arrows pointing up, and I think that is because that diagram, it's one we use in a lot of our engagement work. It's almost the journey that we take people on, and so the idea is that it starts with being aware of Exmoor, you then discover it, you then start participating, and hopefully you then start engaging in more. And in a way, we don't really want people to go backwards on that journey. We want everybody to move forwards. But I think in terms of the listening, we could certainly read that into the introduction, if that's the wish of members.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Fran, you're next.
Thank you. Mine's really more of a statement than any question. I just wanted to congratulate how much communication has been raised in the past, I think at least a year, if not 18 months or more. I mean, on my Facebook feed, they might be to do with the algorithms, etc. But I absolutely know what's going on, and I think as someone who doesn't live on Exmoor, you know, I think it's really important, because I'm probably the type of person that you want to engage and get more people here who are less involved. So I do think that that has absolutely improved, and I take on board what Bill says about, I think you do need to say that you know, most of this is privately owned, and also to encourage the forums. So you're having more of that, but I think, as you said, the Chief Exec's going to update on that one. But I just really wanted to say, it's definitely that the bar has been made, and I think it's really, really very informative in all the channels that you are using. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura.
Thanks, Chair. Following on from Fran's comments there, I just wanted to say I've worked in national parks and in national park communications for several organisations for years, National Parks Partnership, National Parks UK, Campaign for National Parks, and I would just like to get on the record how Exmoor really punches above its weight in terms of comms, especially considering the small team, and I think you should be very proud, and it's great to see this strategic work developed, and I just wanted to respond to a couple of the other points. To just make it clear that actually this is a comms plan, not community engagement plan, and there is a difference there. So the forums would come more under community engagement. This is how we communicate the work we're doing. So there's a slight difference there. And also on the messaging, key messages are sort of a message framework. There are lots of messages that sit under that arise at the appropriate time, like Exmoor is not owned by the National Park Authority, only small percentages. So I'm confident that the team are delivering those messages at the right time. It doesn't necessarily need to be in a strategic level document like this, but it's a good point to raise. I just wanted to raise the issue off the back of Mr. Foxwell's comments actually, that there is a challenge here with conflicting audiences. So it's not a case that we can have a single message that arrives with different audiences, and I know the team are aware of this. I was at a Shore Search event at Minehead at the weekend, and I was chatting to a person who lives locally on Exmoor there, and he was raving about pine martins and saying he's almost ready to leave Exmoor because of the reaction from the local farmers and how there's a conflict there, and the national park comms channels have a responsibility to cater for everyone and to engage with everyone, so you can't just follow a single message there, and it's very, very complex, different spaces to engage with that. So the other thing I did want to just raise, because we do punch above our weight, it would be nice to try and go for more national press coverage as well. I know we've been in the Times and we've had some nice national pieces, but I think we've got enough going on here and enough stories to really pursue that, and I'm happy to help with that if appropriate. But yeah, thank you for sharing it. It's a very comprehensive strategy.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind talk about it. Stephen, did I see your hand? Oh, excellent. I wasn't concerned.
Are you going to let me speak?
I am.
Oh. I'm actually just going to echo something that's been said about forums, because I know that we will take the opportunity to use the forums to spread the national parks messages and things that we want to get over. But I think the perception generally is that the forums are a two-way process, and it's an opportunity for engagement and for the park to hear things from the local population. And therefore, I think it sits rather uncomfortably that in the owned media diagram on page 9, we have the NP forum as part of the owned media. To be honest, I think it would be better taken out of that altogether, and if you want to substitute public meetings or something of that sort. But the forum, I think, is a slightly different beast, and it is something that is not going to sit well locally, or indeed with some members, for that to continue being in that spot, I think. I know it's a philosophical point, but nevertheless, it's one perhaps we don't need to go headlong into at this point.
Thank Now, are there any more hands? Oh, God.
Oh, well, thanks, Dan. Yeah, this was in some ways a long overdue document, wasn't it? It's kind of spent several years doing comms and stumbling around within it and just treating things on an item by item basis. To actually see a complete plan in place is fantastic, and yeah, thank you to those people that have been involved and had the time to do so. I think in a good many ways, if this is implemented fully, and it will be, I'm sure, it will address several of those concerns that Mr. Foxwell raised, and I would hope it did so. It's never going to get to all of them. I did start reading through and started scribbling a few bits, but then as you go through, several of the bits that I scribbled down were answered later on in the document. You know, for example, early introduction and so on. Comms is a two-way process. We do, but if we go further on, that's highlighted that it's a two-way process. I think that is our outward comms has become exceptionally good, and thank you, Carol, for that. You've done a fantastic job on that. But I think there is opportunity for some of our listening comms to be better, and that's been highlighted by those 2 or 3 bits recently around the stuff. Well, let's wind the clock back a little bit. Our nature recovery vision, the pine martins, I suppose comments around beavers in the past, sea eagles, even what we're doing with our own estate to some extent, the likes of Pinkery and with Driver. So I think there's an opportunity. We can do better. There's no question about that. And but the challenge is always, isn't it, is how do you actually get that message out there and end up engaging with the people that you need to speak to? It's not always that easy, because quite often they don't come forward in the early stages when something goes out. They only come forward when a big enough group gets together and all hold hands and come rushing towards you, suggesting we now don't like this as a group. And I know, I get, because I live here, and I'm in the markets, every time I go to the local markets, I know what the conversations are going to be around. And there is some basis in it. So, when we've got this now, we've got to ensure we make really good use of it. Yeah, if you had another 3 people in your team, say, yeah, we can do all of this, it's great. Sorry, that's not going to happen. But I think the challenge to members, actually, and I think some of the lack of engagement, I'll be quite candid here, on our outward stuff, is down to those of us that sit around this table. Don't expect the officers to do everything and put a comm strategy out and tell people what's going on. We sit in the authority meetings here, we know what we get presented with and voted. Go and talk to people. Use your social media channels as well as the National Park ones, and work together and help them. And then instead of me actually getting in the markets and getting challenged by everybody, I hadn't heard about that, what I saw so-and-so yesterday, they didn't tell me about this, we wouldn't be in that position, and we wouldn't be in the position that we get challenged every time, Dan, that you haven't told us. You know, why haven't we heard before? So, the next bit is actually, item 11 actually. You're here as a member, you're getting some recompense. Make use of your time, not just by coming here and talking internally, but by getting out and helping our staff to do the job they're actually very good at. On that basis, I'd like to propose the recommendations are adopted and thank Dan and his team, particularly Cara as well, very much for all the work they do.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm happy to second your proposal, Chairman, and thank you, Dan, for all the work you do. Just a question as well, Chairman. Not just younger people, but all people and older people now rely on their mobile phone to tell them what's going on. And I run a group of about 50 people. It's been on email, and it's been driving me up the wall because they don't respond, especially when I'm asking them to pay. So on Sunday I set up a WhatsApp group.
Oh, no.
I put them all on, and it went absolutely bonkers for about 12 hours. They all loved it. And because I set it up to help myself, tell them what I wanted them to do or tell them what I was going to do. But that sort of way of connecting, Dan, it's interactive, and I was blown away by the members of this group talking to each other. They weren't talking to me, they were talking to each other. They thought, oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Dear, oh dear, somebody's got a bit of time, got to put some time to it to sort it all out, isn't it? But Lord, it just goes on, so you don't have to interfere. Are we, or can we do something of that nature? Because if an organisation, if you belong to it, and you're on a WhatsApp group, everything that sort of happens that the organisation wants you to know about pops up. I know it's a headache as well, but it's the only way I find that I can get hold of people when I need to and get a response. So maybe there's something there we can think about. Thank you.
I've got a few more hands. Should we do those? Because then there's more to come. Sorry. So next one I have was Mandy.
Thank you very much. Just to say thank you really for the comms that you do. I do use social media a lot. I share a lot. I run a couple of local pages. Whenever something needs to be shared, if I go to the Exmoor National Park page, it's nearly always got a post there that can be shared on. And for me, it's much quicker and easier. And that's why the thank you to actually share something than create it from scratch and then try and find some photos. I think that's really positive. But the follow-on from that, there are a lot of fantastic social media groups here. If I look at Exmoor photographers, if I look at, there are a number of really great sites. And for me, in promoting Exmoor, not only the work of the park, I look to promote it as a destination, as a place to go for health and well-being. And I think there's a multitude of groups that work together well on Exmoor. And I think the photos and the opportunities that Exmoor presents are second to none, I have to say. It's a beautiful place. Second point for me, please don't set up another WhatsApp group. I have far, but joking aside, you know, social media, etc., there's so much of it now, trying to keep up to date with it all. It's really important to probably focus what you're doing. So thank you for what you do. You do a great job. I think it's a way to engage with everybody, and it's things like events, for example. You can set up an event and you can share it. And I generally, and I look at the Dark Skies as an example, you know, that is trailered all through the year, so you get a run up to it and people get interested and an excitement there. And I think you excel at it and keep it going. I, for one, appreciate it, but I think it is incumbent on us all to play our part and to, we'll say, big up Exmoor. I think it's got a huge amount to offer. We can all do that, but there is that balance around how much time does that element of your role take, because you can get lost in it and suddenly a few hours are gone. So thank you, doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I think there's a health and well-being aspect to social media as well, is all I'm going to say. Bill, did you want to come back?
Yes, please, Chairman. On the point 2 on the recommendations, it's correction of typographical and factual errors. Is there any way we could include the wording that allows for recognition of points that are being made today to be included in alterations? At the moment it's accepting it with only typographical and factual errors corrected. Is that possible?
Yeah, and you'll have to take that off.
Yeah.
And your second is happy to take that off. Thank you. Any more hands? Or any more questions, should be? Have we answered everything? I can't remember.
I think the only points maybe come back on briefly is a suggestion around WhatsApp, and again, as I've kind of stressed, it is very much evolving, the digital arenas. WhatsApp 2 years ago was nowhere. There are now kind of WhatsApp groups and kind of channels that organisations can have. I think, as you suggested, you know, a group of 50 members and you get inundated, and obviously with Exmoor we've got an audience of millions potentially, and so again, with our capacity, it is something that we have to look very carefully at, but I think it is evolving all the time. Let's say there's channels that used to be very popular are now dropping off and they'll get replaced. So I think it's under continual review. We do use WhatsApp already, in particularly amongst the staff team, just to share kind of good news stories and messages. So if somebody's out and about and sees something, they can get it back to the head office quite quickly to get something out on social media, for example. So we are using it. Whether we're quite at the stage of looking at a kind of WhatsApp community channel, I think that's possibly a step beyond our capacity at the moment, but I think we will continue to keep all of these options under review as for kind of world evolves, really.
Thank you very much. Right, so we've got the recommendations, and also want to add in, if you're happy, to thank Carol particularly and helping to raise our profiles, and everybody in the room has said how well you're doing, so thank you. All those in favour? Yeah, members, that's unanimous. Thank you. So we're going to move on now to item 10, which is the local development scheme, and Bruce, I see you've joined us.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everybody. So this is just a summary really of the report you have in front of you on the Exmoor Local Development Scheme, or the LDS, which is the timetable for reviewing our Exmoor local plan. You're probably aware that our current LDS, which is on our website, was adopted in 2019. And we would have been needing to review it. But the reason we're reviewing it now is because the government has requested that all planning authorities produce an updated LDS by the 6th of March. So this authority meeting fell quite well, just in advance of that deadline. So as a result of the request, the Planning Policy Advisory Group met in February, and officers have produced a revised LDS, which is set out as Annex 1 of the report. And what it is a sort of, at this stage, a best estimate of key local plan consultation and submission stages with dates. But under the current plan system, and the reason that's important to emphasise is that we're expecting announcements on national changes to planning and plan making later this year, and so I think the chances are that we're going to have to revise or review this local development scheme once we're a bit clearer what the government is asking planning authorities when it comes to local plan making. So in the meantime, we are looking to arrange a meeting with Planning Policy Advisory Group in the spring for further discussions on the review of the local plan. And the recommendation before you is to approve the revised LDS today. We will then be enabled to publish it on our website and send a copy to Ministry of Housing and Local Government by the 6th of March deadline.
Well, that seems quite clear. Any questions? Stephen?
It's not a question at all, Madam Chairman. It's just pragmatically, I don't think we've got any option other than to do this. But clearly, we're expecting that national policy changes will mean that the plan will probably have, timetable will have to be adjusted, changed, thrown up in the air, and the pieces of land to land again, come what may. So I think the only thing we can do today is to approve this, get it in by the deadline, and then watch this space. So I would propose the recommendation.
And I'm very happy to second. Well, it's all very straightforward. Choices aren't there really, aren't they? Are there any questions on our no choice item? Okay. All those in favour? Okay,
Not even I.
That was unanimous, because we had no choice. Okay, item 11 is scheme of member allowances, and Ben will come back to do this for us.
Thank you, Chairman. So the purpose of this report is to consider and adopt a scheme of members' allowances for the financial year 2025-26. You'll be aware that this is a statutory requirement. The Local Authorities Member Allowances Act 2003, Regulations 2003. So in front of you is the proposed paper, very similar format to previous years. It complies with that regulation. It has been equality assessed to have no adverse impact on the group or individual. We have made allowance for a 3% increase in allowances to tie to the budgeted change in staff allowances that we're proposing. And it sets out a basic allowance in section 3 of Appendix 1, payable to all members for their time and incidental costs of just over £3,100 a year. It sets out the special responsibility allowances and when they're due. It sets out the availability of a dependent carer's allowance for those circumstances which you are able to reimburse for care expenses. And it also sets out the mileage subsistence claim rates for the ensuing year. I don't have a great deal more to say than that before you. But just to say that it's a statutory requirement we publish this prior to the financial year starting.
Thank you. This is another one of these things that keeps popping up. Any questions? Robin?
Well, I mean, yeah, we had substantive discussion. I see the item there I haven't had a traction yet, but we'll be there to look at members' allowance on the independent remuneration panel. I mean, as I've said before, actually, there's quite a large debate around members' remuneration and so on. My own feeling I've made quite clear is I would expect members to be compensated adequately for the time they spend. I would also expect the members to look at this and ensure they do provide an adequate return to the authority for what they have as remuneration every year. And I'm sure members are all responsible enough to ensure that's the case, but please bear in mind, you are getting compensated for your time, so please make the best use of it and ensure you do use up that time on behalf of the authority. And the other thing being that, in spite of varying comments in the past, I've always been sort of opposed to reducing it to a relatively low levels because effectively that excludes people that can't afford to be here otherwise. And I feel that's entirely wrong. Otherwise, the group of us around the table would just get progressively older in reality, and that's not good for the authority. So, on that basis, I'd like to move the recommendation, please.
Thank you. Mandy?
Thank you. I think we had quite a debate about this last year. In recollection, we were going to look at the independent remuneration panel. And I know that's in the report. That was in March 24. I'm just wondering, has that happened? Is it going
It says it's being progressed, isn't it?
Say again?
It says it's being progressed in this year.
Okay, so that is in the pipeline as well.
Happy to keep this? Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And do we have a seconder then? Oh, gosh, Mandy, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's all been item 12 is the personnel update, and we're welcoming Shelley, Tracy, Lisa and Lee, the seasonal information advisors, and we hope they have a successful season. And we're saying goodbye to Rebecca and wish her well for the future. Members' reports. Nobody contacted me to say they had one. Does anybody have one? Not really. I've closed the meeting.